Bhakta Vrinda. Your turn. Shri Krishna Nityananda. This we can just all sing together a few times. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Prabhupada, 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 Jayo Prabhupada, Nitya Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo. Gaura Premanandi Hari Haribo. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Forgot to mention today's topic is Unwrapping Christmas or Unlocking Christmas.
Yes, Ramchandra Prabhu has given me a very interesting topic, and I have to admit it, I was a little bit kind of struggling. What should I talk about? But then after I started thinking about it for a few minutes, I may have ended up with too many things to talk about. So we'll just start on my list here, my notes, and hopefully at the end we'll have time for some questions. So please, if any questions comes to your mind whatsoever about anything I talk about or something related to Christmas or any other topic, communications or what's the GBC's doing or anything else at the end, feel free to ask them those questions. And Rampur, let me ask, is 9:30 a hard stop or it's a little flexible? I want to honor your culture here.
It's flexible. In fact, our question answer goes for another hour. So.
Oh, it does? Oh, seriously?
As long as the speaker is ready to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if I can last 2 hours, but I'll do my best. We'll see how it goes. Okay, good. It's important to ask though, because sometimes people on, it's very strict schedule and sometimes not so strict. So I like to understand a little bit.
We build that time into the traveling time. We said we don't have to drive back and forth anywhere.
That's true.
No cleaning, no nothing. So
that's true.
Yeah, we're flexible.
That's very true. It's a good way to take advantage of the opportunity. So again, the topic that Ramchandra Prabhu gave me is unpacking Christmas. So start by offering my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Vancha kalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. So I'll just start with a couple comments, and I'm going to read a little bit of Bhagavad Gita and some other references from Prabhupada from the Science of Self-Realization, and a couple references from the Bhagavatam, and a couple references from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we'll put in some scripture. I'm not going to necessarily connect this just with one particular verse. So it's of course is a very appropriate topic. We're 2 days away from, at least in what they call the Western Church, which is what we mostly experience in the United States and mostly experience in India, although not exclusively, which is, the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant churches. This is Christmas for them. Some of us may not know that actually for the Orthodox churches, Christmas is sometime later. I don't know the exact date, but they celebrate it sometime in early January. So they also have their own differences of opinion on the calendar. and how the calendar is understood, what day is what. But either way, for us living in the United States, I think most of us here are in the United States at this point in time. Christmas is coming up in a few days. So a question might come up, well, why do we want to talk about Christmas? I mean, does it have any importance for us as Vaishnavas, and if so, why? And I would say, yeah, actually, it's quite important for us. In part, in the simple terms, just because we live in a country that is so much dominated, by the Christian culture. It's kind of like if you lived in a Buddhist country, you'd want to know a little bit about what the Buddhist holidays are and what the Buddhist ideas are, so you can interact with your neighbors, and at least you can calculate your vacation appropriately according to what religious holidays are coming up and things like that. But more importantly, as Vaishnavas, it is important for us because we have a very, very broad-minded understanding of the nature of spiritual life and religious practice, and especially the representatives of God. There are some people, and sometimes it's Christians, and others, who have kind of a narrow understanding, like our way is the way, and anything else is either a little bit kind of completely wrong, maybe even, the devil or Maya or somebody's misleading you. Our way is right and everybody else is kind of wrong. But that's not the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And I'll read a verse that I quote a lot. I find is very helpful on these topics. This is from the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya gani bhaviti bharata abhutanam dharmasya tadatmanam sridam yaham. Krishna says, whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. So he says, he comes again and again and again. Whenever religion goes down, irreligion goes up. And then in the purport, Prabhupada makes a very interesting comment. He says, it is not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. So we shouldn't think that any incarnation, any representative of Krishna, if they come from India, it's bona fide. Somewhere else, we don't accept that. Prabhupada says it's not a fact that the Lord appears only on Indian soil. He can manifest himself anywhere and everywhere, and whenever he desires to appear. In each and every incarnation, he speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. But the mission is the same. Very interesting point. But the mission is the same, to lead people to God consciousness and obedience to the principles of religion. Sometimes he descends personally, and sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or servant, or himself in some disguised form. And then he goes on and explains it a little more in detail. But this is a very, very important principle that Prabhupada is giving us. When you think the Bhagavad Gita is our most essential text. So here Prabhupada is translating what Krishna said, what the Supreme Personality of God has said. And then he's giving, of course, his very elaborate transliterations, and so everybody can go back and see the word for word meanings and like that. But then he's giving his elaborate purports. And in this purport, Prabhupada is not only elaborating on what Krishna says, he's giving us some view about understanding other religious traditions and communities throughout the whole world. And as we've seen, it's very broad-minded, understanding that it's not just that Krishna or his representatives can appear in India, they can appear other places. So it opens the door for us. Well, what about these other people around the world that are worshipped, oftentimes at least revered, as representatives of God, and do they have any place for us? So as Vaishnavas, we can appreciate, not only can, but we should appreciate representatives of God, spiritually minded religious people who evoke a spirit of God consciousness in people's hearts. For us, that's what matters. Doesn't matter if you're speaking Sanskrit, if you're speaking Aramaic, or if you're speaking Greek, if you're speaking what other language. If it's awakening and evoking people's love of God, we say that as a good thing. Prabhupada explains this a little more detail in this is from a chapter of the Science of Self-Realization called Understanding Krishna and Christ. And I'll just read a little bit of this. Prabhupada elaborates a little more on the personality of Jesus. I thought maybe we'll look at a few things within this question about unpacking Christianity. First, Jesus, and then look a little bit about what our interactions might be with Christians in general, and then what's our view of Christmas and what messages can we take from Christmas. So here's what Prabhupada says about Jesus. Jesus Christ was such a great personality, the Son of God, the representative of God. He had no fault. Of course, the message that Christ preached was just according to his particular time, place, and country, and just suited for a particular group of people. But certainly, he is the representative of God. Therefore, we adore Lord Jesus Christ and offer our obeisances unto him. So we may think, well, what am I supposed to think about Jesus? Well, Prabhupada says we should adore him and offer obeisances. Once in Melbourne, Australia, a group of Christian ministers came to visit me. They asked, what is your idea of Jesus Christ? And I told them, he is our guru. He is preaching God consciousness, so he is our spiritual master. The ministers very much appreciated that. So this is Prabhupada speaking that I'm reading here. Actually, anyone who is preaching God's glories must be accepted as guru. Jesus Christ was one such great personality. We should not think of him as an ordinary human being. The scriptures say that anyone who considers the spiritual master to be an ordinary man has a hellish mentality. If Jesus Christ were an ordinary man, then he could not have delivered God consciousness. So Prabhupada is elaborating his own feelings about Lord Jesus Christ and what we should feel, that he's empowered representative who's spreading God consciousness. So that's important for us to keep in mind. It's the Christmas season. And Prabhupada also was appreciating, we read a little bit, and he says this many places, how Lord Jesus Christ sacrificed everything, including his life, to try to preach God consciousness. Prabhupada sometimes would say, he was teaching people, thou shalt not kill, and they killed him, and they killed him. So just see how much he was willing to sacrifice himself. He's trying to spread the message of God the Father. So what about Christians? I mean, we live in a Christian world. Sometimes Christians are quite friendly to us. Sometimes they might be a little inimical. Sometimes people a little over the top. In this day and age, with the political situations going on in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of things that are coming out about people that claim to be following Jesus that we may not find particularly in line with our understanding of Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. So a couple thoughts on that. Ideally, as Prabhupada was pointing out here, as Vaishnavas, we should try to have a mood of appreciation for and actually looking for the opportunity for cooperation with Christian people. We understand that our goal is to try to spread love of God individually and especially communally. We want to spread love of God. That's also what they are trying to do. Prabhupada comments on this. This is from in the 1950s in the light of the Bhagavad. Very interesting book. No time to discuss it here, but Prabhupada wrote, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and the members of the other sects, religious sects, that have convincing faith in the authority of God must not sit idly now and silently watch the rapid growth of a godless civilization. There is the supreme will of God, and no nation or society can live in peace and prosperity without the acceptance of this vital truth. So he's showing this broad-mindedness that Hindus, Muslims, Christians, members of the other religious sects that have convincing faith in the authority of God should not sit idly and watch the spread of atheism or lack of God consciousness, but they should understand they have a mission to carry out, and as he's implying here, they should do so in a cooperative way. My personal experience, just a few days ago, we had, what's today's, Wednesday. So it was actually a week ago, we had online, because like everybody else, most people were locked down. We've had for the last 5 years, this year was the 6th year, a Vaishnava Christian dialogue in India for 2 days. Now this year we did it online. We've actually had a Vaishnava Christian dialogue, a 2-day face-to-face meeting in Washington, D.C., for almost 25 years, where we have Catholic priests and Protestant ministers and sannyasis and temple presidents and Vaishnavis and Christians, male and female, and professors and practitioners come together and talk about different topics that are to learn about the different perspective of those topics according to our tradition. So the one in India that we've been having, the last 2 years, we had it in Tirupati for several years. Last year we had it in Chennai at the ISKCON temple, hosted us both times. And then this year we had to do it online. And the topic was about internal and external climate change, talking about how, the environment and how it's an issue to all of us, especially religious people. But also, we're not just interested in what happens on the outside, we're concerned about what happens on the inside. And if we clean our hearts on the inside, that will be manifested in how we treat nature, because we'll understand it's Krishna's energy. And of course, the Christians have a different perspective. They say pretty much the same thing, but they have different terminology. So it's very, very helpful learning. Krishna Kshetra Swami and Krishna Kishore Prabhu, who recently completed his PhD at the Union Seminary, which interestingly is a Christian seminary in New York. So he's a Vaishnava scholar, and he recently completed his PhD. So the two of them, they made the presentation from the Gaudiya Vaishnav side. We had another professor who gave a presentation who lives in South India from the Sri Vaishnava side, and then a Roman Catholic priest gave a paper, and then a Protestant PhD candidate gave a paper. So on that particular topic. So my experience from doing these different kind of dialogues is that actually there's a lot we can learn from Christian people, sincere Christian people, sincere maybe in the sense that the open-hearted people, just like we know even with devotees, if you know a particular devotee who kind of has nothing really to tell you but to criticize you, whatever you do, like it's not enough. I remember when I was president of the temple in Denver, Colorado, and even before that, I was what we used to call the Bhakta leader for new devotees. And we used to have a rule: if somebody new joined the temple, nobody could talk to them or give them instruction unless you were directly in charge of supervising them. Because otherwise, the whole temple thought it was their duty to tell everybody what they're doing wrong. So some new person would come and they say, no, don't put your shoes there, put your shoes over there. Right? And then they walk in, they say, no, don't sit like that. Don't point your feet towards the deities, point your feet there. No, don't point your feet towards Prabhupada. Don't touch the book with your left hand, for crying out loud, etc. Don't eat with your left hand, and then, within a couple hours, they're gone. Because there's so many rules and regulations in this place. Rather than we wanted to kind of gradually introduce the rules and regulations, but mostly help new people experience, the happiness of bhakti and the welcoming nature of bhakti. So the same way as devotees, sometimes we can kind of be the mentality of, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, which isn't a good mentality. Sometimes we can be people from other traditions that are in the same mood. They just want to tell you what you're doing wrong and why they think you're not going up, you're going to go down at the end of this life. So those kind of folks that are close-minded, there's not a whole lot that we can really have to share. Sometimes, but sometimes not. But with genuine people that have some interest in learning about other traditions or learning about you, maybe you got a friend at work or something like that, there's a tremendous amount that we can share. And I would suggest that the first thing we need to do is make sure we deepen our own Krishna consciousness. Because if we don't know what we're doing and why we're doing it, you meet someone from a different tradition, you get all confused. Someone says, well, why don't you have, we worship on Saturday, or we worship on Friday if they're Muslim. We worship, what's your holy day? Jesus, we don't have one. Oh, really? That's weird. Then you start, oh, that's weird. We don't have one. Well, why do we, some say, oh, you worship on Sunday. That's a Christian day. So did you learn that from Jesus? I'm not sure, right? Well, etc. So we need to understand those things so we can go deep in our own. We need to go deep in our own tradition, so we can share those with other people. Again, otherwise the differences will confuse us. And if we're deep in our own tradition, even when there's differences, it becomes a point of stimulating our own Krishna consciousness. And someone may ask, well, why do you do that? That's a good question. I'm not really sure that. Let me find out, get back to you. Or why do you do that? Well, actually, here's why we do it. And then by explaining, you become really inspired and you're sharing. And then you can ask people, why do you do that? And sometimes we're like, that's pretty good. We don't do that. Maybe we should learn from you how to do that. I had experience, I've mentioned this sometimes in some of my classes, that when we were doing the Vaishnava Christian dialogue in India one year, one of the Protestant professors, after the second day, he said, I want to share something. He said, we Christians, and this is in the spirit of Christmas very much, he said, we talk a lot about how God sacrificed for us, right? Most of you probably heard they have their kind of little mantra, you know, God, Jesus was God's only begotten son, and he sacrificed himself for us. You know, they talk about his being killed. They see that as him giving his life up to try to purify them from their sins. So he was saying, we Christians know a lot about how God sacrifices, how God loves us. He said, but you Vaishnavas, you really know a lot about how to love God. And it was really beautiful, because I was thinking, actually, maybe sometimes we don't really think as much as we should about all the gifts that Krishna gives us. Sometimes we kind of take stuff for granted. You know, we think the earth is just, sometimes we may think, oh, it's the lower energy. You know, we're only worried about the spiritual energy. But without the air, we'd be in pretty bad shape. Without the air, without the water, without the earth, without the shade of the trees, without the light of the sun, without the running waters, go on, the list is practically limitless. But sometimes we forget that. So sometimes in interaction with people from others' faith, they help us see things. And maybe we can help remind other people about other things. So in general, in terms of our interaction with Christians or people of other traditions, again, unpacking the idea of Christmas and the fact that there's a lot of Christians out there in the West, and how do we interact with them? Well, there's a beautiful booklet. You can look this up online. It's called ISKCON and Interfaith. I think if you Google it, or if you go onto the ISKCON news site, iskonnews.org, you can go there and you can look at this. Or if you go to communications.iscon.org, it's on that site as well. It's a little a booklet, was authorized, officially adopted by the governing body commission executive committee. And there's a lot of very interesting information here about how to interact with people of other faiths. One of the points they kind of highlight is we should always be humble when we meet people from other traditions. We shouldn't think, well, maybe in our heart we're deeply convinced about what a wonderful revelation is about Krishna being the supreme person, and he plays a flute. He's got a wonderful place called Vrindavan, and that's great, but that shouldn't make us proud, like, oh, I know something you don't know. That really breaks relationships. The first principle of knowledge, Krishna says in the Gita, is humility. So if we're understanding anything of Krishna, then we should be more humble. Not that we're understanding something of Krishna, now we become proud. That just means we're not really understanding when you told us. We're taking it pretty superficially. So we should be humble, we should be respectful, we should be honest. These are some of the things that are highlighted here. And very tolerant. And make sure that we're a good representative of our tradition. You know, the same way we kind of hold people up to say, well, you know, if you're a Christian, why aren't you like this and like that? Well, they have the right to say, well, you say you're a Vaishnava, so how much are you representing Lord Krishna? How much are you representing Prabhupada? Are you seeing that whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious practice, that the Lord comes or sends his representative? Is that the broad-mindedness you have? Or you think he's only in your temple? Or he's only in your Zoom call? You know, there's probably 1,000 Zoom calls. There's probably, could be 100,000 Zoom calls going on right now where people are talking about God. There's probably 100 of them just ISKCON Zoom calls right now. What to speak of all the other traditions? So it's not like, no, God is only, he's only in my screen. You know, my little, whatever it is, 14-inch screen here. It's not he's only on my screen. He can't be on that screen. So we don't see like that. There's a nice prayer I like to read from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He elaborates this from the Sri Chaitanya Sikshamrita. Some of you have heard this before. It's a beautiful prayer. He says, when we have the occasion to be present at the place of worship of other religionists at the time of their worship. So again, we're talking about unpacking Christianity, unpacking Christmas, and how to interact with other traditions, especially looking at Christianity. He says, we should stay there in a respectful mood, contemplating thus. Here, in this mosque, in this church, in this gurdwara, in this synagogue, here is being worshipped my adorable highest entity, God, in a different form than that of mine. Due to my practice of a different kind, I cannot thoroughly comprehend this system of theirs, but seeing their system is remarkable. I love this. But seeing it, I am feeling a greater attachment for my own system. Not that I walk in a church and I think, whoa, everything's different here, or I don't like this. I'm afraid of this. It scares me, or I have to defeat it. Wow, look how Christians manifested here. Woo, they got some beautiful paintings of their understanding of the Lord. Just see how he manifests his beauty in this tradition. Or, well, look at that book. They got a whole book that's completely different from my book about God. Wow, just see how he's so great. He manifests in so many languages and so many traditions and so many cultures all around the world. Krishna, you're so wonderful. Look at this other book. Well, this just confirms what you said in the Bhagavad Gita 4:7. Whenever and wherever there's decline in religious practice, you come again and again and again. Just see it's true. Like that. Then he ends, seeing it, I'm feeling a greater attachment for my own system. I bow down with prostration before his emblem, Krishna's emblem, his emblem, as I see it here. And I offer my prayer to my Lord, who has adopted this different emblem, that he may increase my love towards him. That even seeing these different systems of worship increases my own love towards Krishna. So this is given by our great Acharya Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So some thoughts. Now, as far as interacting with other people, Christians, we're talking about that aspect of it tonight. We also know not everyone we meet is going to be so broad-minded. Not all devotees are so broad-minded. We're certainly not going to meet all Christians are so broad-minded. And what do we do if we meet somebody who's particularly close-minded, whether when we're preaching to people or just people maybe at work or our neighbors? Again, we should be respectful and just kind of move on. That should be our mood. I remember when I was a younger devotee, I was full-time book distributor, and sometimes I would meet people and they would say, I'm a Christian. And I would say, that's great. That's wonderful that you identify as a servant of God. We're showing everyone out here this beautiful book, the Bhagavad Gita. And it's a different culture and a different language than you're familiar with, but it talks about understanding the greatness of God and how to love God. Are you interested in understanding how other cultures think about God? And, sometimes they would say, nope, the Bible's the only way and the truth and the life, and I don't want to read anything else. I would say, well, thank you very much. God bless you. Have a really wonderful day. Because I can't talk a whole lot more with that person. If they're not even open to the fact maybe there's another source of knowledge. But if they're a very devout Christian, I say this is a different book, a different culture, a different language that teaches about God. Are you interested in learning about different cultures, different languages? Then they say, yeah, I am a little bit interested. Well, great. Then you can have a nice conversation. Now, it's probably not, with most people, it's not going to help to try to say, well, actually, this is better than your book. I mean, we may have that faith, but that's not going to get us anywhere. And in that context, there's a beautiful quote from Prabhupada that's, again, quoted here. It's just a 30-page brochure, but it's got a lot of good things in here. This is a quote actually from the Srimad Bhagavatam. We know our highly exalted Shastra. 4th Canto, 22-24, Prabhupada says, in his purport, another important point mentioned in this connection is the nindaya, avoiding blasphemy. We should not criticize others' methods of religion. So we were talking about how to interact with other people. Prabhupada says we should not criticize others' methods of religion. A devotee, instead of criticizing such systems, will encourage the followers to stick to their principles. So someone comes to us and says, I went to church yesterday and it was a wonderful experience. We should say, well, that's great. Excuse me one second. One nice thing about Zoom, when you're going to sneeze or blow your nose, you can mute. You can mute everybody. If you're in a live room, you have to either run out the door or, as my grandchildren used to tell me, sound like an elephant. So it's much nicer to mute. So we shouldn't blaspheme others, even if they're a little critical or not so open. We can be respectful, let them go on their way. Now, another thing I want to talk about, unpacking Christmas. What can we learn from Christians, and particularly from Christmas? And I want to look at a couple negatives first. Let's do the negatives first. One, we see all around us, especially those of us living in America, it's really easy to get distracted from what the message is, isn't it? I know I've been in India some during Christmas time too, and it's like it's the same, it's the same thing. You know, it's kind of funny to see Santa Claus standing out at night when it's 95 degrees, but he's there and he's all bundled up with his wool hat and his red coat, and he's got reindeer. I don't know how the reindeer are doing well in the you know, there's no snow to land on, but he's there, and there's candy canes, and they're playing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and all those kind of things. And that's not the original message or the core message of Christmas. And most Christians would agree with that. It's very, very easy to get distracted from the real goal. And today we see in America, let's just talk about the United States, oftentimes Christmas has become more about shopping and more about buying gifts and getting gifts, more about consumption than actually worshiping Jesus Christ. And of course, we know, you know, the capitalist, you know, the malls, and of course this year's tougher, but they try to promote this, you know, they try to increase your fever for more and more things, and this sense of, well, you know, she spent $200 on my gift, I have to spend $200 on her gift. And sometimes, you know, people are thinking like, I have to buy, oh no, I have to buy a gift for Mary. I didn't think, oh, Mary, oh my God, I got to buy a gift for Mary, isn't it? And the relationship with Mary kind of comes secondary to the gift to Mary. So it's a big issue. The concept of giving gifts and sharing time with family and affection, and you know, it's one of our 6 principles of love in exchange, to give gifts and accept gifts. We're not opposed to gifts, right? It's not like we don't want to give gifts. Prabhupada would exchange so many gifts with his disciples, etc. But there's a danger it can become overwhelmed. What's the core message? That's the problem. And I won't do it this year, but a lot of years I go to I go to church a couple times a year, usually with my interfaith things. But sometimes if I'm free on Christmas Eve, I try to go. And there's a lot of sermons on Christmas Eve about, hey, everybody out there, you know, have a nice day tomorrow with the presents, but please don't forget what the core message is of Christmas. It's not about consumption. So the Christian leaders themselves are aware of that. And we have to understand in our tradition too, we have to be very, very cautious. And I was thinking as example, say Ramahar Sutta. He was a big, big leader, big spiritual leader, big Brahmin. Everyone's there in the yagya waiting for him to speak, but he offended Lord Balaram. And he lost everything, including his life. So he lost the core message, didn't he? He got distracted by the externals. So we also have that ability to get distracted by the externals. So that's something we can learn about from Christmas from a negative sense. There's a tendency to become focused on ritual over devotion. I was just reading in the Lilamrita just today, Prabhupada, when he first went to Paris, the temple president, in those days they were all new devotees, right? Temple president meant maybe you were a 3-4 year devotee and everybody else was, you know, a 1 year devotee. You had a lot of seniority there, a few years. He walked into this meeting, I think it was in the airport with Prabhupada, and he walked right up and sat right next to Prabhupada, thinking, I'm the president, you know, I'll go sit by Prabhupada when he came to visit. First time, I'm pretty sure first time. And Prabhupada just didn't even look at him, just ignored him. And then they introduced some devotee who had been, I believe, translating the books. And this devotee sat way in the back, like in humble. And they said, Prabhupada, this is so-and-so translating. Prabhupada made a big deal. Oh, he's translating the book. Stand up. Let everyone see you. Thank you so much. And then later, I guess the sannyasi who was traveling with Prabhupada, you know, one of his traveling parties, and Prabhupada, this is so-and-so, the president. And Prabhupada's like, okay, let's go on. He just... And the devotee said in his interview, he said, immediately could see this is my spiritual master because he's humbling me. The first time I meet him, he's kind of chastising me. This, you know, don't think you're such a big shot. So a very important message for us. You know, it's not social status or caste. That doesn't matter. You know, Vanashram status, that doesn't matter. What matters for us is love of God. But there's a tendency to get stuck. And we know the whole beginning at Bhagavatam, the whole beginning of Kali Yuga was when Shringi, who was a Brahmin, supposed to be the most renounced, the most elevated, the most humble, he offended the king. He cursed the king, took a little offense very, very seriously. And that's the point when everything the beginning of Kali Yuga. So we have to be careful about that. So that's a negative message that we should learn when we see all this kind of materialism going on. And what's the positive message? There's a lot of positive messages that we as Vaishnavas can take from the Christmas time, unpacking Christmas. One, we have a lot of things in common with Christians. The idea of God as the supreme person. They even use the word Godhead. It's not so popular these days, but they talk about the supreme Godhead. They particularly worship God in the mood of Father. Prabhupada also talks about that. We don't emphasize that as much, but he says in the Gita, right? I'm the original Father of the universe, the original Mother of everything. So that concept is there. They talk about we should love God, we should serve Him. That's our whole message. We agree that God wants us to return to Him. He wants us to give up our sinful or rebellious nature and serve Him. So there's a lot that we have in common, a lot that we can learn. And also, I think something really beautiful that we can learn from Christmas when we get past the superficial things is, again, it's not just about reindeer and Santa Claus. There's a real spirit of devotion within the Christian message. And it's just like, if you go in a store and you hear all these songs, and so many of them are just stupid, almost even just grossly materialistic as time's gone by. But there's some real devotional sentiment there in their bhajans. They have their form of bhajans. And I was just thinking, one, maybe you've heard a lot, and I'll just, in the spirit of universal bhajans, I'll just chant a little bit of this. Give me one more second here. Sorry, I have to mute you there. I'm having some allergies come and go lately. I don't know if it's because we're locked inside so much lately or what it is. But here's a song you may have heard before. And just, it's not, it's in English, but it's certainly not in Sanskrit or Bengali. It's not exactly the culture we use, although it does talk about drums. So maybe you'll feel some connection there. But listen to this beautiful message here and the simplicity of bhakti, which I think is an important thing that we can become reinvigorated when we think about Christmas. And some of you have heard this a lot of times. I'm going to sing just a little bit of it. It's very simple, and then just switch to the last, just reading the words. So it starts. Come, they told me, param pa pam pam, a newborn king to see, ra ram pa pam pam. Our finest gifts we bring, ram pam 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 pam, to lay before the king, pa ram pam pam pam, ram pam pam pam, ram pam pam pam. So to honor him when we come. So this is a song about a little boy. Jesus has appeared. Everybody's going to offer him something, and he's being invited to come. So he's singing this song. Okay, now just read the rest of the lines. Little baby, I'm a poor boy too. So he's talking to the baby child Jesus. Little baby, I'm a poor boy too. I have no gift to bring that's fit to give our king. Like the king, and that he's representing God. Shall I play for you, my drum? Mary, his mother, nodded. The ox and the lamb kept time. I played my drum for him. I played my best for him. Then he smiled at me and my drum. It's a very, very, very simple message of devotion and bhakti, which is this simple boy who somehow is going to have, you can say, the darshan of baby Jesus, and he's thinking, what can I offer? I don't have anything. I don't have any money. I don't have any riches. I'm just a kid. Well, I know how to play a drum. I can try to do my drum for him. And this is so much the mood of bhakti. I was again reading the Lamrita today, and Prabhupada, was a lady devotee this particular time who was approaching Prabhupada and saying, how do I please you? And Prabhupada said, you just chant Hare Krishna. And she said, but what other service should I do? Prabhupada said, there's so many services. That's how he answered her. There's so many services. You can be a pujari. You can do this. You can do that. And this devotee mentioned in her memory that it just dawned on her how Prabhupada and Krishna are so merciful. It doesn't matter how much you offer. It doesn't matter how educated you are, rich, poor, Indian, American born, black, white, Russian. Those things don't matter. All that matters to Krishna is our bhakti, right? The Gita, if one offers me with love and devotion a fruit, a flower, a leaf, or water, I will accept it. So that's the spirit of this little Christian bhajan. I have nothing, but I can play my drum. Rum pum pum pum. Very beautiful. So I think that's an example of one of the very positive things we can learn from the Christians. A couple other points, and then we'll open up for some questions. I think another thing we can learn unpacking Christmas is the spirit of giving. Again, it becomes too materialistic, but behind it all, there is this spirit of giving, that you should share what you have, and that you should use your assets in Krishna's service. And I think this is an important message from again, the work that I do, interfaith. Excuse me again, got in this allergy problem. One thing I see working, interacting with the Christians, they're really focused on charity. It's a big, big, big deal for them. And most, not all, but a lot, and I think most Christians, they have this principle, 10%. And for a lot of them, 10% off the top. If you make $100 a year, you give $10 first, then you pay for your heat, your water, your taxes, whatever afterwards. Some people say, no, you pay your taxes, then you're 10%. But they're very strict about that. Some Christian churches, you're not even accepted as a good member if you're not giving 10%. Now, in our tradition, we sometimes just kind of ignore that. But our guru said 50%. Prabhupada said 50%. Now, okay, the fact is numerically 50% is not possible for a lot of people, because by the time you take your gross, you pay your taxes, you pay your mortgage, you pay some food, there's no 50% left. But we can always strive at least for 10. And when people become a little more affluent, then you can give more, up to 50. And we know, a lot of times people, they store away 50 or 60 or 70. That's not what Vaishnavas are supposed to do. Vaishnavas, we're supposed to use whatever resources we have in God's service. So again, here we are, the Christians, who sometimes we criticize. They don't follow all the principles we do. They follow some. But then we should learn from them on this one, about the spirit of generosity, and understand that whatever we have, a Vaishnava is meant to think belongs to the guru, belongs to my Diksha guru, my Shiksha gurus, belongs to the founder Acharya, belongs to Krishna. It's not my house, it's Krishna's house. Not my bank balance, it's Krishna's bank balance. It's not my job, it's Krishna's job. Krishna can take it away in a minute. We all know that. The economy, especially these days, is a little shaky. If Krishna wants to give, there's a nice, Prabhupada references that his father was very, very devoted and cared for his family, but very detached. And his father would sometimes say that, God, Vishnu, he has 10 arms, right? We know Krishna has 2, sometimes Vishnu is seen with 4, sometimes 8, right? So God, with his 10 hands, and I with my 2, if he wants to give to me, how much can I take? Isn't it? He's got 10, I've got 2. How much can I take, right? And similarly, if he wants to take away with his 10 and my 2, how much can I keep? Isn't it? So it's a nice, it's a poetic way of explaining that. And we see, all of us as, as adults, we see sometimes, so much is given to us and sometimes it's taken away. And at the time of death, everything's going to be taken away. But the question is, how much did whatever we had was in our heart a spirit of generosity and a spirit of trying to show our gratitude to Krishna for that. So I think that's a very, very important message that we should learn from the Christians. And then another thing, that's really, I think Christians and Christmas we can learn about. Christian people, sometimes there's a little, not enough focus on transcendence, we might say. Sometimes I feel we as Vaishnavas have too much focus on transcendence and not enough on the here and now. And it's a message I think we can learn from Christmas about being very concerned about the welfare of others. You see all these people out ringing their bell, the Salvation Army people, People give a lot of money in charity at Christmas time, millions and billions of dollars they give, to help people. And of course, we know ultimately, Prabhupada says again and again, the best way to help people is to help them awaken their God consciousness. But that doesn't mean that we don't care about people's physical well-being. If I come to see Ramchandra, I say, I drive to New Jersey when the COVID's gone, and I pull up into the temple, I say, Ramchandra, I got a problem. When I got out of the car, I cut my leg, I'm bleeding really bad. And he says, Anuttama, just to chant Hare Krishna, because you're going to die sooner than you expected. Yeah, well, Ram, I think I need some help getting to the hospital. Anuttama, don't be so materially attached. Just chant Hare Krishna. No, Prabhu, I think this is really serious. Okay, I'll chant with you. See? Thanks, Ram Prabhu. I really appreciate it. But, can somebody else here, a little more sanity, get me to the hospital? Now, if I go to the hospital and they say it's too late, you're dying, I want Ram to chant with me. There's no question about it. But in the interim, it'd be kind of nice if we concerned about these other things as well. And Prabhupada oftentimes would say, you can't, he quote this expression, you can't preach to a man on an empty stomach. People are too materially distraught. There's no time to really think about God. And conversely, if they're too materially absorbed, they can't think about God. Nice quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is from the Sri Tattva Sutram 35. Again, in the spirit of Christmas and learning from the Christmas spirit. Those who think that devotion to God and kindness to the jivas are mutually different from each other and perform accordingly in their life, such persons will not be able to follow the devotional culture. Their performance is only a semblance of devotion. Therefore, all the types of beneficence to others, like kindness, friendliness, forgiveness, charity, respect, etc., are included in bhakti. Because if you're doing bhakti, you have to have these things. If you don't have these things, you're not really doing bhakti. Charity of medicines, clothes, food, water, etc., shelter during adversities, teaching of academic and spiritual culture, etc., are the activities included in the devotional culture. So I remember there was one professor at Harvard University. He was actually Christian minister. Harvey Cox was very, very well known at that time, still well known. And he used to bring his devotees to the temple in Boston. And he also wrote one of the forewords for the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. I can't remember which volume now. It might have been the first one. I can't recall. But in his foreword, he mentioned something about, can it be something as exotic as Krishna consciousness, as this Vaishnavism has come to the West, where there's so many Abrahamic traditions, right? In those days, it was mostly Christians and Jews. Could it be they're come to remind us of what we've forgotten in their simplicity, in their devotion, in their willingness to give up the material comforts of life to try to share the message? Is it possible this completely different tradition, similar of course, but completely different, maybe they're here to teach us something? That was a question this big professor and Christian minister. It takes a lot of humility to say that. And this was in the 70s. The Hare Krishna movement was much smaller, considered much more exotic. People were considering maybe we were some kind of cult and didn't even know about our, the authenticity of the tradition. But that's what he said about ISKCON. So in a similar way, can't we be broad-minded and think, what is it that we can learn? Can we not also learn from these people that put such an emphasis on caring for others? I think we can. I think we have something to learn from that a lot. And then the last thing I'll mention is that I think one thing that we can learn from Christmas and going back to the real original spirit of Christmas is the concept they have of Jesus coming into the world to share the message of God, to spread love of God, to help people give up their sinful, materialistic ways, and again, turn themselves to God's mercy. So I think that enthusiasm for us, taking it on board in our own community, our own culture, enthusiasm to preach, to try to spread Krishna consciousness, God consciousness to others, and the willingness to try to sacrifice our own comforts for others, and especially in the effort to try to help awaken God consciousness. I think that's a very, very important message. So when we think of Christmas, We shouldn't just think, okay, it's when the malls are busy. Yeah, the malls are busy. That happens, And the best part of that is, well, they're buying gifts for their family and friends. Well, that's a nice thing as long as they don't get too carried away with it. But that in conclusion, we should appreciate Christmas. We should certainly appreciate Lord Jesus Christ. Prabhupada said some places he's a Shaktivesh avatar. He's an empowered representative of Lord Krishna. So we should appreciate him. We should appreciate his teachings. Honor. That the highest commandment is to love God with all your heart, your mind, and your words. I think if I'm paraphrasing that correctly. I mean, that's a powerful bhakti teaching. Love God above everything else. That's our message. So appreciating him, appreciating his teachings, learning to deal with respect and to deal with appropriately and respectfully with Christians. And some of them may not be so open or friendly to us. That's okay. Have a nice day, sir. We wish you all the best. Others we can have some nice rapport with. And to learn from their good example, amid whatever mistakes may be there in the modern culture, learn from the mistakes as well. Okay, there's some materialistic excesses there. Let's not go there ourselves. We know the story, the parallel story. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he told Prabhupada, you print books, he said after the first part of the message was he was concerned because they were getting this beautiful temple in Calcutta. He said, all my disciples now, they're fighting. They're fighting over which room's bigger, which room's got the better view, which room's going to be cooler with the cross breezes. And that's when he said, better you take the temples apart. You sell the bricks, brick by brick by brick, to make money to sell books. Now, clearly, that wasn't a simplistic instruction, because otherwise Prabhupada would have gone out and got his pickaxe and our Prabhupada would have started taking down the temple. That wasn't really what he meant. What was the principle that we need temples? Prabhupada wanted to build temples. But if we start thinking, our temple, oh, look at our new temple. Our temple's bigger than the other Hindu temple on the street. And wow, we're building a new temple. Well, hey, listen, I'll donate, but it's got to be bigger than that mosque, because we have to show the Muslims up. Or we should use better quality, marble than the Christians, so we can show how pure we are. Those are all ridiculous thoughts. That's like, materialistic people that you got to have. The wives have to have better dresses than the other women at the party and stuff. This is not who we are. That's not what we're about. We want a beautiful temple. Why? To attract people to Krishna. That's why we want to have beautiful temples. So ourselves, a reminder to not get distracted, and to try to also, last thing to remember, to feel reinforced in our tradition's teaching about its bhakti. It's about simple bhakti ultimately. We have rituals, we have tremendous philosophy and shastras to study and slogans to learn and detailed deity worship and so many different aspects, the 9 aspects of devotional service, but it all ultimately boils down to awakening love of God. So when we hear things like the drummer boy, and we see that's the essence of their tradition, Krishna, let me become so simple-minded. Let me be like that drummer boy. I have not. What can I give you? The universe has come out of your pores. What can I offer you? Nothing, but I can try to offer a little devotion. Please help me try to offer a little devotion. So when Christmas comes, we should think this is a reminder to all of us to offer a little devotion to the Lord. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Another nice feature of Zoom is you get a very attentive audience. Nobody's talking in the background, all those things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And before we go to questions, if anybody has any questions, just be ready. You could either type or just raise your hand. I'll just make a quick announcement. So before people drop off and all, as you all know, that Friday we're celebrating Gita Jayanti, Mokshada Ekadashi. And this year, for the first time, we are doing both the English and the translation and the Sanskrit. So just make a note that we have 2 separate Zoom conference logins. The program starts sharp at 5 o'clock. And here's an opportunity to read the entire Bhagavad Gita. So plan your day accordingly, where you're not distracted during the reading time. Finish your prasadam or whatever it is before 5. And also encourage others, even if one can read one verse of the Bhagavad Gita on Gita Jayanti, they get a lot of mercy, you get a lot of mercy. So promote this very important day to your friends and relatives and well-wishers. And then on Sunday, we'll continue with our Gita Jayanti, uh, in the mood of Gita Jayanti. We are going to celebrate, the Sunday school is going to be reciting the Bhagavad Gita verses. And again, I request everybody to join, encourage them, support them. They're going to be not reading it like on Friday. These are all memorized verses, their realizations and all. So the entire Sunday program will be by the Sunday school children. So that's pretty much it. Now we'll open the floor for any questions. I'd like to start with one thing. Prabhuji, you probably know or not, I'm not sure, but we operate at a church out of a Lutheran church in North Jersey.
Nice.
Yeah. And the first day when we arrived there for our first day's program, it was Lord Nityananda's appearance day.
Uh-huh.
So the pastor had a big sign on the door, welcome our new guests. Our new friends actually. He had a big sign. And one of their board members was there to greet us. And they were surprised to see 150 people, where we had said we would have about 40 people, 40 to 50 in our programs. It was Lord Nityananda's appearance, and 150 showed up, and they loved it so much. They saw the enthusiasm. We invited them for prasad. The pastor came, the board member came. Later on, as we were leaving, he told me that, can you share with me, what do you guys do? Because whatever you guys do, we would like to do, because in our Sunday prayers, we don't get that many people. So you must be doing something right. We would like to learn from you. So the openness, what you were talking about, what we can learn.
Yeah.
So much openness.
Great.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
Then post that, we also did an interfaith over there with a Muslim group, the church. Then there was also a Jewish representation. So it was really nice.
So this was at the Lutheran Church, and we participated. So Lutherans, Muslims, Jews, and us, and the Christians.
Yeah, they hosted the church itself hosted. We do that once a year, and they invited us to speak. So they were very, very happy with our presentation and all.
Very good. That's
Ram
really...
Sharan Prabhu. Ram Sharan Prabhu has a question.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All good.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Prabhuji, my question is, it's regarding the destination of the devotees of the Lord Jesus. Within ISKCON community, I heard the two versions, actually two versions, let me say. So one devotee mentioned that Srila Prabhupada mentioned that Jesus has his own planet. So that's where these devotees will go. And I was just researching on that. Just Prabhupada written some letter to Bhagwan Das. I think it's mentioning that the persons who follow the 10 commandments, they are in the mode of goodness. So these souls are promoted to the heavenly planets. That is still in the material world. So Prabhuji, could you please throw or more elaborate on this? What is the on this topic?
Yeah, I'm surprised when you said there's two opinions. There's probably 2,200 opinions on that.
Okay, I heard two. That's why I was.
Yeah. Did you find actually a written reference? Like, did you Google? The prophet said they would go to Jesus's planet. I've also heard that, though I can't.
Yeah, actually,
read it.
What happened is Rompal Swami Maharaj was giving the class, and that class there is one devotee is there, senior devotee. He said to the Maharaj that Prabhupada mentioned like this. Then he gave the reference.
I've also heard that. I don't know if I've ever, I mean, I'm not saying there's not a reference. I just don't know where it is. Yeah, I would just kind of give a general answer that more often than not, Prabhupada would say, if you awaken your love of God, you go back to God. And he would also say that any bona fide process that helps people awaken love of God That's bona fide religion. So I think, and in general, that's how I would understand that. I've seen for myself a lot of Christian people that I think are more devoted than a lot of Hare Krishna people I know. They've
Yeah.
actually, now whether or not, they're following everything we follow, or they certainly don't know Bhagavad Gita, this and that, but they have a genuine desire to serve God, love God. And I'll say I've met people, I think they're certainly more devoted than I am, and they're following a different religious path. So, I would just feel for myself, I can only answer for myself. I would think that's, in fact, I read something about this just today. What was it? Prabhupada, someone was asking Prabhupada a question. Oh, I know. Amarendra Prabhu, who went on to become one of ISKCON's most important attorneys in North America. Prabhupada was in Gainesville, Florida, and Amarendra was like a former kind of a student activist. And Lina Rita said he was kind of like pushing Prabhupada, like, what do we do? How do we make people take to the movement? How do we, push this on people? And Prabhupada said, all you can do is ask people to chant Hare Krishna, and then the rest is between them and Krishna. So sometimes we lose the sense that it's an individual choice to serve God or not. It's an individual, commitment, and people have their free will. So some of us, maybe we're born in a Vaishnava family, but we don't take it particularly serious. Somebody else is not born in a Vaishnava family, but tries with their full heart to try to understand and serve Krishna according to their capacity. Who can say who's more blessed? I mean, in one sense, being born in a Vaishnava family is really wonderful, but there's a fair number of people who are born in Vaishnava families and don't take it seriously. So, I think ultimately it's up to the individual soul and their relationship with Krishna, and I wouldn't want to speculate in any individual. We do know Prabhupada said, Jesus is a pure devotee of God, and if you follow a pure devotee, who knows exactly where you go.
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to, anything more than that, I'd be speculating.
Okay.
I think if Prabhupada was here, Ram Sharan Prabhu, he would say the thing you should worry about is where are you going to go? I think that's what Prabhupada would actually answer that question. He did that a lot. Sometimes devotees would say, but Prabhupada, how do we fall in this material world? He would say, you fall into the ocean. Do you ask, how did I fall in the ocean? Or you try to get out? Sometimes he would answer questions like that. So I don't mean to minimize your question. It's a nice question, but that's how I could best answer that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, Prabhu. Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
There's a question in the chat box. As in the market, there are many different types of mobile phones, and in every company, customer care represent and claims my product is the best of all. Similarly, in every religion, the representatives claims and praise their process is correct. But how can one know which is correct and the best?
That's a good, thank you, whoever. I think I must have planted that question, because there's another quote that I wanted to read that I didn't get a chance to. This is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Well, first, there's a little bit of writing from the author of our book, okay? This is the ISKCON in Interfaith. So this ISKCON writes, while cherishing our own spiritual culture and working to proclaim our faith in Krishna in Vrindavan, we consider it inappropriate and unbecoming for Vaishnava to try to attract people to the worship of the Supreme by denigrating, misrepresenting, or humiliating members of other faith communities. Now, we propagate Krishna, but we don't do that by pushing others down. Okay, in relation to this, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written, quote, it is not proper to constantly propagate the controversial superiority of the teachers of one's own country over those of another country. Okay, it's not proper to do that. Although one may, nay, one should, cherish such a belief in order to acquire steadiness in the faith of your own. But no good can be effected to the world by such quarrels. So we should have very, very deep faith that, you know, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Chaitanya came to teach Nam Sankirtan, which is the Yuga Dharma, and be absolutely convinced of that. And at the same time, not think that it's our purpose to try to defeat others and convince them that ours is better than what they're doing. And again, I think my sense is, I'm trying to remember the term. I'm not going to get it right. So it's I won't even try. I'll say it wrong. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about a lot in his writings the vision of a person who is so spiritually deep, they don't discriminate between who's following what tradition. In other words, we may say, well, there's a Christian, or there's a Jew, or there's a Muslim, or there's a Vaishnava. But the spiritually advanced person measures or sees people more in terms of their spiritual advancement. So a very devout Christian, for instance, may have more in common with a very devout Vaishnava than someone from their own faith. Or really, you know, spiritually advanced Jew who's really understanding, you know, the purport of the Bible and God's love for all of mankind and all that, may find a lot more in common with the devout Muslim than they would like a fellow Jew who's just doing the rituals like that. So I think when we're really, you know, going deep in our Krishna consciousness, we see that Krishna is so vast. I mean, I was at my son's home last night with our grandkids, and they were talking about how in our scriptures, some places that Krishna appears in every species. I'll never understand that. I don't know if Prabhupada was ever asked to explain that. But the idea that God actually comes in different, he's everywhere trying to deliver the fallen conditioned souls. So it's not so much about, well, okay, he came here, this time, this place, this is best, I've got the best, everything else is less. He's coming again and again and again and again and again. And I should be a little more concerned about, okay, I may spend my time thinking about how I've got the best instead of taking advantage of the best. Somebody else who maybe doesn't have the best but is fully giving their heart to it may be way ahead of where I am because I'm just walking around thinking how special I am. And, you know, that's a danger. I mean, the world is full of pseudo-religious people who think they're special, and they're all killing each other. And that's the fact. A lot of people that are very convinced that their religion is the best, they're killing each other to prove what they think is true. And meanwhile, I think the sincere religious people are kind of walking around in a much more humble mood, seeing how isn't it amazing? You know, look at that. I mean, you know, Jesus talked about that since we're talking about Christmas, about how the widow, they had something called a widow's mite. I don't know, maybe look it up. I think it's MITE, like this tiny, tiny, tiny little itsy bitsy coin, like a 1 paisa coin or something like that. They don't even have paisa coins anymore in India, but Jesus talks about her 1 paisa coin is more important and more valuable. He gives this analogy of the rich men that walk down the street and, you know, they have their servants blowing the drums. So-and-so's coming to worship, isn't it? That actually the widow's more important. And sometimes, and I don't say this to criticize, but to critique so we can learn to do better. I've experienced sometimes, like in our temples you go, and you know, some enthusiastic young devotee, oftentimes it's a brahmachari, is like pushing people out of the way so that a sannyasi they're serving, or maybe their diksha guru, can get to the front of the line. And I'm thinking, well, their enthusiasm is nice, but it's really misdirected, because if they're really understanding the tradition, you understand these people are worshiping Krishna. Who am I to push somebody out of the way so that I, or the people that I identify with, can get to the front? Now, to humbly say, excuse me, Prabhu, excuse me, Mataji, you know, sannyasi here, we certainly want to respect sannyasis and elders and like that. But sometimes we just take it really, 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 really superficially. You know, and that's okay. That's the way we all start out, but we have to go deeper than that.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Shraddha, Mataji, you have a question?
Can you hear me? My name is Prabhakar.
Oh, okay, Prabhakar, go ahead.
I come from Tirupati, which you mentioned that you were there temple.
Yes, one of my favorite places in the whole world.
Okay, my question is, I've been in this country for more than 50 years. So I'm out of touch with my own country where I came from. My question really is, how do the, like Tirupati, where the temple of, is very important for all the pilgrims who come to the temple. How is ISKCON temple seen? Is it including with the, with the pilgrims who come to Tirupati for Balaji, whereas you have your own Krishna temple? So is there any interactions, pleasant interactions
Yeah,
for?
yeah, that's a very nice question. And I know a little bit about this. Um, the ISKCON temple is a very, very beautiful temple, which is right at the foothills of the Balaji mountain. So when you come down off for those that don't know, most of you probably do, there's this very ancient temple on the top of this mountain, the Tirumala Hills. Ramanujacharya climbed up on his knees, so many great acharyas. I think Mahaprabhu went there. Prabhakar, do you know, did Mahaprabhu or Ramachandra? I think Lord Chaitanya went there. Prabhupada went there, we know that. Very, very famous.
Yeah.
And ISKCON has a temple there maybe for the last, maybe presence there for 30 years. Beautiful temple opened about 10 years. We have, initially we did not have a good relationship with the Sri Vaishnava community. There was a lot of tension there. But the devotees over the last 15, 20 years, following this mood of humility, appreciating that their mood of worship is slightly different from ours, but focusing on, the great things that are there within Sri Vaishnavism, they build very, very good relationships with them. So now, oftentimes, when they have big festivals on the Tirumala Hill, they ask us to come and do kirtan. And when we were opening our temples, they invited the head of the ashram there to come to the temple to, sanctify the event by his presence. And that person in charge, he actually came, Radhika Raman, I get it mixed up. Revati Raman Prabhu, who's the president there, said this big acharya, he came the whole 2 or 3 days. He didn't want to leave. It was such a wonderful festival. And not only that, just to give real idea of how we work together, there's 4 places where ISKCON has book tables at this most orthodox center of Vaishnavism, right at top of the Balaji Hill, and then there's a Lakshmi temple, and there's 4 different temples, maybe 2 at the top of and there's so many pilgrims there. The devotees go in shifts. Devotees go from like 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Because there's so many people to interact with, and Tirupati, they don't have a big Christmas marathon. They sell books all year long, all at the Tirumala temple, and they love us. They're very happy to have us there. And I was there actually last year on Vaikuntha Ekadasi, which is the same day we're staying on the 25th this year, and was fortunate enough to go into the temple for Vaikuntha Ekadasi. They say, all kinds of special benedictions if you do that. And they had a special arrangement for about 50 ISKCON devotees. This is a place that handles hundreds of thousands of pilgrims practically every day. It's the most complex, you go in a little room, they move you from room 1 to room 2, from 2 to 3, from 3, and each room holds like 100, is like the size of a football field or something. It's very, very, and they love ISKCON. They have tremendous respect for ISKCON. They actually have now, one of the famous things they do in Tirumala is they sell these big not gulab jamuns. What is it? The big sweet, the crumbly sweet. I'm forgetting the name.
Laddu.
Laddu, thank you. Big laddus like the size of a softball, right? Americans know what softballs are. Big laddus. And they actually have ISKCON run some of their temples, some of the tables, because they like us. They trust us so much. So we have an excellent relationship with the pundits, as well as it's called TTTD, I think, the people that manage. There's 2 different groups there. But yeah, very good relationship, Prabhakar Prabhu. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about Tirumala. I love that place. And you should go back. You should go back soon. You will be so inspired to see the ISKCON temple. And they have very, very, very beautiful Radha Govinda deities there. You can probably look up the picture online. And the Govinda deity is unlike any deity I've seen anywhere else in ISKCON. Because, Balaji sends, I don't know which hand is up, forgive me, but Balaji sends very straight, very straight, right? And normally Krishna's in his threefold bending. This Krishna, he's almost straight. And they put he has like a lot of like darkness on his eyes. So he looks a little like Balaji. I mean, it's Krishna, but the deity is really carved in a way that you can see he manifests in that way to kind of make it easier for people to go in to see Balaji. And he stands there with the Astashaki. So it's Radha Govinda and the Astashaki in this beautiful, 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 beautiful temple. And it's wonderful because you see all these people coming in with their head shaved, and they had their head shaved for Balaji. And then so many people stop at the ISKCON temple. It's wonderful synergy to see the communities working there together so well.
I remember when I was there, they have a museum also underneath the temple.
Yes.
Nice diorama.
Beautiful
and
diorama.
there were so many pilgrims that the people just coming in and going, and there was nobody to show them around. So I felt that I'm not from Tirupati ISKCON, but I am ISKCON. So
Yes.
So I started talking to some of them, and I kind of walked them around and showed them what these dioramas are.
Wonderful.
It's beautiful. And if I'm not mistaken, the land was given by Tirumala.
Yes,
trustees.
I should have mentioned that. You're right. It was given by Tirumala.
Yeah.
And we also have a nice Goshala there. Yeah, they gave us the property.
Right.
So it's wonderful cooperation.
I'll go to.
Prabhupada said, when Prabhupada visited there, and he said that we should learn to manage the way they do. It's very, very well managed. They're a little lax lately in terms of their environmental consciousness. I was there last year. They paved over a lot of what used to be beautiful grassy areas, but the crowds are so big, they just don't know what else to do.
Shraddha Mataji, you have a question?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude for the wonderful online disciple course. I very recently completed, and it was all your lectures, and they are very, very helpful, very, very nicely put together course. So thank you so very much.
Congratulations on your graduating from the course.
Thank you, Prabhu. So, Prabhu, I have a question that when we come to ISKCON and we know the reality of Krishna being the supreme personality of Godhead, the phrase itself carries so much of weight, and then we learn about the glories of Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the scriptures that are inherent, and then of course Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Chaitanya Charitamrita and the lineage of all the acharyas that we have in our sampradaya. For some reason or the other, it just gets into our head that we belong to the best sampradaya, and that mindset of that superiority, it's just there, even if it is not being cultivated consciously, it's just there. And what to talk about other religions, I think this whole thing of superiority that we are Krishna bhaktas reflect even when you worship Lord Ganesha. I mean, okay, that's fine, but try to elevate yourself. That's what. So my question to you would be that how practically we can check this very spontaneous kind of a feeling in ourselves, and not to get into that.
That's a beautiful question. Well, one thing is, as devotees, we understand that, like Prabhupada says, you can't see God of your own endeavor. He reveals himself. And we know that in this age, we're all very, very fallen and materialistic people. We're not great yogis. We're not great ascetics. We live in a society that's very polluted in so many ways. So whatever we know of Krishna is a gift. We have to understand that first of all. So like when you talk about knowing Krishna as the Supreme Personality of God and his wonders and our Shastra and our acharyas, and when we read about our acharyas and all of their lives and all they've accomplished, we should feel we're blessed, like they say, right? Blessed with the best, right? We should feel like that. But we can respond either in a materialistic way or a spiritual way. Materialistically, if you're given some gift, you become proud of it. Well, look what I have, you know. Let's say your father gives you a beautiful car. Let's just say your father gives you a beautiful car. So I'm going to simplify it, but you could take that, you could become very proud of that car. You drive down the street, you honk the horn at all your friends. Hey, look what I've got. How come you don't have the same thing? Look how much better I am. That's one way you can respond. Some people respond like that. Or you can respond and think, I am so unworthy of this gift. I'm so humbled by this gift because without this car, I couldn't get to work. I couldn't take care of my family and my friends or go to school, whatever I'm doing, different stages of life. How can I share this gift with others? You know, my father gave me this gift. Well, now I know what, let's say I'm a student. I know other students that don't have a car to get to school. So let me try to figure out how I can drive to school in a way to help them get to school. Or I have coworkers, I know they have to walk, 5 miles home from work or take a bus and it takes so long, or they can't pick up groceries at the store. But now I have a car. I'm so blessed. How can I use my car to help them? So I think we can simultaneously appreciate the gifts we have and either become proud and arrogant and rude and harsh and maybe even mean. There's a lot of meanness, say, in the political system in America these days, So we take for granted what we have. We think, oh, it's all me. I did it all. I deserve this. Or we can think, this is a gift of God. And how can I share it with others? There's that beautiful English expression, but by the grace of God, there go I. So sometimes we see people have less, but by the grace of God, by God's grace, I've got a little more. How can I share it? So if I have this beautiful understanding of God, then let me share it. And sharing it doesn't mean, let's say, okay, I'm going to share what I know of Krishna. Sometimes we can't directly give people Krishna, but we can help people make a step towards Krishna. That's why I read where Prabhupada says better than, if someone has another religion, encourage them to follow their own tradition. So our faith in Krishna, as we heard from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is that he's also present in these other forms of worship. He may not be so directly manifested. We know the Maha Mantra is directly calling on Krishna, it's directly calling on Radha, but it doesn't mean other mantras don't have any use. So if you've got a Christian friend, better you encourage them to go to their church. Maybe they can take the next step like that, rather than try to hit something over the head. Yours is wrong, mine's better. That's where the problem lies. So I think the critical point is, if we understand it's a gift, we should see, if I'm being humbled by this gift? If I am, then I'm in a Vaishnava mood. If I'm becoming proud, thinking I'm better than somebody else. You know that story Prabhupada tells, Punar Musika Bhava? You know that one? Nice story. You can look it up. There's a recording of it. Prabhupada tells the story that once there was a mouse and he was being harassed by a cat, right? Okay, now you remember it. I'll tell it anyway. It's a nice story. He's being harassed by a cat. So he goes to a great saintly person and he asks him, I need some mercy. And the saintly person, what do you need? Well, I'm being troubled by a cat. Okay, so what do you want? Please make me a cat. He says, okay, and he chants a mantra. He becomes a cat. He comes back a few days later. Yes, what do you want? He says, the dog's giving me so much trouble. So what do you want? Please make me a dog. He makes him to a dog. Chants a mantra. Comes back a few days later. Again, you want something. Yes, the dog, there's a tiger bothering me. So what do you want? Make me into a tiger. So he makes him into a tiger. Chants a mantra. So then he's sitting there looking at him. And then the yogi, the yogi says, so what do you want now? You want to eat me? And the tiger says, yes. And he says, Punar Musika Bhava. Again become a mouse. So the whole world, I was thinking about this the other day. It's Krishna I mean, as devotees, none of us want, like I'm sitting in my warm house, I look out the window, there's a little forest outside. You know, the birds are out there shivering, the squirrels are out there shivering, it's 20 degrees. And I'm thinking how fortunate I am that Krishna's given me this. Um, but if I become proud, then maybe I have to become a squirrel again to wake up to the reality that it's not me, it's Krishna's mercy that's given me whatever I have. So God's got a tough position because we want things and he wants us to be comfortable. He wants us to be happy. He wants, the whole spiritual world's full of comfortable, happy people, right? He wants us to be there. And in this material world, he also wants us to be happy. But the problem is we start taking credit for it. We get proud. And then we think, well, who needs Krishna? Look, oh, my dad gave me this car. Who needs my dad anymore? It's, he gave me the car. I've got the car. I'm so good, So God gave me so many gifts. We start thinking, I take the credit for them. By my intelligence, I made all this money. By my hard work, I became the president of the company. By my good looks, I won so many awards. Well, no, Krishna can take away our good looks, take away our money, take away our power in an instant. So in the material world, he's trying to give us the things we need. But when we take those things and become bewildered, then the whole material world's set up to take them away from us again until we realize, oh gosh, Krishna, I did it again. I forgot you all over again. And the whole Shastra is full of stories of people. Some of them become very saintly or very powerful demigods, and they keep forgetting. So Krishna's, material nature, and with ultimately Krishna, because he's trying to help us, he crushes them again. Their material false ego crushed again. So once we become religious, if we start thinking, oh, just see, I used to belong to the best football team, then I belong to the best country, then I belong to the best social club, now I belong to the best religion. This is better than anything. See? Same old, same old. Now, in one sense, of course, it's a lot better to be proud of being, my religion is better. I mean, that's a good thing. Somehow we're attached, but we shouldn't stay there. We have to go deeper. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so very much. Hare Krishna.
You can be proud, but be humble proud. Be humble in your pride.
Do you have a question?
That was
Go
a
ahead.
very nice question, Shraddha. Anybody else?
Sorry.
Madhava, go for it.
Fergus Froji, thank you for a wonderful class. So my question is that
Wonderfully being here.
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for wonderfully being here.
Thank you. Proji, generally when we people hear that when they hear that we also believe in Jesus Christ, then generally at least I've experienced, the notion comes that okay, that means that they also do the general traditional Christian practices also. But that's not necessarily the case because we have our own Gaudiya style. So how do we properly make them understand the point that change of culture doesn't necessarily mean change of the same beliefs or the same morals, if that makes sense?
Yeah, are these like your student?
Yes, Proj.
How old are you?
I'm 18.
18. Yeah, good. I was going to guess 18. There's an expression, you can take a man to water, but you can't make him drink. You know that expression? So I'm sure you've met some people and you probably have some friends and they say, well, what's your religion all about? Well, we believe we're not the body. Wow, that's cool. And that actually there's a soul within the body, even the animals. Wow, that's really cool. So you guys protect animals. Wow, that's great. And and we believe that ultimately this world's all meant to teach us about where we're from and that suffering actually ultimately it's God's mercy on us to help us wake up. Wow, that's really amazing. And they soak it up, right? You've met people like that. And you have other friends that they're not open to hear what you have to say. And you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So I remember when I became a devotee, because I'm not, unlike you, I wasn't fortunate enough to be born in a devotee family. So I had this, kind of real transitional stage in my life. And I remember some of my as I became a little more, I wasn't even a Hare Krishna, practicing Hare Krishna yet, but just becoming more serious about spiritual life, some of my friends just kind of filtered away. It was like, whoa, he's changed. George Harrison has a song like that. Can't remember the lyrics, something like, some of my friends, they say he's changed. We don't want anything to do with them anymore. You're getting too serious about the spiritual stuff. You don't want to go to parties anymore. You don't want to talk about girls anymore. You don't want to like try to sneak out of your house when your parents aren't looking anymore. Like, whoa, we don't have anything to do with you. And other people are my experience with some people I wasn't very close to, all of a sudden, like a whole nother level of friendship. I think a lot of people, whatever age we take to Krishna consciousness, we have that experience. There may be some Muslim kid. I know I've got a friend of mine, he's a younger guy than me, but he's probably 30 now, who went to school. He went to medical school, like in the Bahamas. He got into some medical school in Bahamas, one of those Caribbean countries. And his best friends, he said, where there was a Muslim guy, himself, a Roman Catholic woman, and I think somebody else, maybe a Jewish guy. And they all hung together because this island was a place there was casinos and beaches. And it was a big like party resort island. So thousands of people flew in there to, break every single one of the principles, right? But they all stuck together and helped each other be strict to, like they would say to their Muslim friend, hey, aren't you supposed to, you're supposed to pray now, it's noon, whatever, 5 times a day, right? 5 times a day. You're supposed to pray now. And they would, and his Catholic friend would say to him, don't eat that. I read the label. There's meat in that. It shouldn't be meat and mustard or whatever it was. So in that association, they gave each other strength. And to this day, he's so grateful, these people from these other religions, but they valued and appreciated and nurtured each other's spiritual consciousness and religious practice. So in the same way, some people want to listen, some people don't. And the ones that don't, you do like cool things, like you bring like some, really well-made, homemade prasadam cookies, and you tell them, hey, you guys want some cookies? And maybe 1 out of 10 of them at a certain point, they'll ask you, why do those cookies taste better than any other cookies we've ever had in our life? And you can say, well, you really want to know? Yeah, I do. Okay, well, are you free on Wednesday night or Sunday? Or, yeah, well, come with me. I'll show you what's happening. You see, the other 9, you just keep giving them cookies. That's the best you can do. So I think a real thing is that I probably use the term all the time, kalapatra desha, time, place, and circumstance. He used that in that verse we read today. Jesus preached according to time, place, and circumstance. So you look where the opening is. You've got a friend that's really into music, try to turn him on to some Christian music. Everybody likes to eat, but got a couple of friends that really love good food, just fill them with prasadam. Somebody else is an artist, you show them some Krishna artwork. We've got beautiful, beautiful, our culture is just fantastic. When the devotees were first in New York City, they were putting posters out in the hippie era, right? Stay high forever, right? Now, none of us would imagine, put that poster on the side of the Lutheran church, see what they think about that. Not so much. It doesn't work today. So we have to be expert at trying to understand, you have to like pray to Krishna, how do we get this message across to this friend? What do I say to this one? What do I say to that one? And it's going to completely vary. I'll give an example. I was at the Denver Temple about 2 years ago for the American Academy Religion Conference. I lived in Denver as the temple president there for 7 years. And I was there for 17 years. So I really loved the place. And I gave the Sunday feast lecture. And afterward, there was this one young woman I noticed during the kirtan who was just really into kirtan. You could just tell she was so just focused on the kirtan and chanting the holy name. So I went up and I sat down. I was talking with her for a little bit. Hi, how are you? What's your name? She was Muslim background. How long have you been coming? I've been coming about a year. That's great. I said, I can tell you really like the kirtan. Oh, I love the kirtan. So I just, typical response, well, yeah, because that's God's name and God's non-different from his name. She said, I don't believe in God. And my brain, I kind of mute, mutated, melted. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I've just seen this young woman dancing ecstatically in kirtan. She just told me she loves the kirtan. She told me she's been coming for a year. She's completely comfortable and happy in the temple, and she doesn't believe in God. Wow. It's like it didn't compute. Doesn't matter. She likes the kirtan. That's not different from Christians. She likes the devotees. She likes the prasadam. Maybe for her, she's got some block. Past life, this life, who knows? So that part of it she can't take right now. She doesn't want to hear the God stuff, but she loves kirtan. Somebody else will talk about God all day long. They can't understand why we keep saying the same song over and over in Hare Krishna. You guys just keep saying the same thing. What's wrong with you guys? That's okay. Just read the Bhagavad Gita. Read about God. Somebody else is, I don't like this place, but man, the food's good. Great. Eat it. Keep eating. Keep eating. There's a lot of times because people in our communities, they can't follow any principles. They're not particularly clean. They're not particularly spiritual, but they like to do service. I don't know about you guys, but if I can, can I help you drive the groceries? Can I wash some pots? Can I rake the yard? It's all fine. In Krishna's eyes, we're all parts and parcels, sons and daughters of Krishna. He doesn't care how we come back. He just wants to help us come back. So we're his servant. Whatever little inclination or little, Prabhupada said there's a little spark to the fire, we should fan it. That's great. Sometimes somebody will say, maybe some friend, I quit eating meat once a week. Now, we could say, well, 6 times a week, that's a lot of hellish planets you're going to visit eating meat 6 days a week, right? We can say that. You can find a few verses to justify that. Or you can say, wow, that's 1 day a week. Wow, that's fantastic. That's great. Christian's going to really help you for that. That's fantastic. Frees, helps, saves a lot of animals, is good for the planet. I'm really proud of you. Maybe if you come to the temple every Sunday or whatever, we could give you meals for like 2 days in a row, and then you'd be vegetarian for 3 days a week. Think you could handle that? Well, I don't know if I can handle that. Okay, well, at least come once a week. Okay, I can do that. What's the next step? I gave this example the other day, and it's a beautiful one. It's so important to remember. If you've read Shama Sundar's book about chasing the rhinos, and I think it's told elsewhere too, when he was a new devotee in San Francisco, Prabhupada wanted to carve the Jagannath deities. It's a long story, but he asked him to carve the Jagannath deities. So Shama Sundar starts carving these pieces of wood. He was initiated. And Prabhupada came in and he had a pack of cigarettes on the soon-to-be deity's head. You ever heard this story, Madhav? So I think Prabhupada flicked the cigarette. I think Prabhupada even flicked the cigarettes off with his cane, if I remember that. Got to go back and reread it. But either way, this for sure. Prabhupada told him, don't let such a little thing as a cigarette come between you and Krishna. And then he told him, just smoke one less every day. Imagine that. He's carving Jagannath. He's an initiated devotee. He's not supposed to do any of that stuff. Prabhupada told him, just smoke one less every day. Basically, Prabhupada gave him permission to, I'm thinking, I want to add it up someday. Add 19 plus 18 plus 17 plus 16 plus 15. That's a lot of cigarettes. Prabhupada basically gave him permission to smoke a couple hundred cigarettes, which is kind of weird in one sense, isn't it? But because Prabhupada could see, okay, one less. Make progress, keep going, don't stop. So that's the spirit behind it, as Shraddha was saying, our acharyas, our mission, just do something for Krishna. So same thing with your friends, whatever way it is, you pray to Krishna, Madhav. I'm not in the room with you. I don't know who those people are. Pray to Krishna. You know them. What are they interested in? Krishna is all attractive. So your job as his servant is to find that aspect of Krishna or some or many aspects of Krishna that they'll like. So that use your God-given brain for that. How do I, there's this nice girl in my science class in my, my lab. How do I tell her about Krishna? How can I introduce her? Oh, this guy's a football player. What might he like to know about Krishna? Wow, maybe he might find Arjuna's pretty cool. What about Bhima? Carries 5 people through the middle of the night to rescue them from the evil murderers. I mean, that's pretty cool. How many people can carry 5 people? 1 on his left leg, 1 on his right leg, 1 in his left arm, 1 in his right arm. I think 1 in his, plus the mother, plus 1 on his back. I mean, wow. talking about big time wrestling or whatever that stuff is. Those guys are nothing compared to Bhima. Like that. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Next time I see you, you got to fill me in on some of the cool ways you figured out to preach to some of those friends, all right?
For sure. For sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shamsundar Prabhu actually spoke in our forum 2 weeks ago. And
Did he? Oh, you're so lucky.
yeah, he spoke about just kind of few things from the book he spoke. Yeah.
His stories are wonderful. Fantastic experiences.
Anybody else? Any question? All right. Oh, Alkamataji? Sure. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, wonderful, wonderful dance. Thank you for reminding us to be respectful and to include respectful of the diversity and interfaith. That was really nice with all the stories and the examples. So you talked about Krishna being seated in the center of all species. So do you think the coronavirus has Krishna in the center of his existence? And if so, how do we reconcile with that fact?
How do we reconcile? Maybe your second part's one is just like technically, is he there within every molecule, every atom? From what I've read in the Shastra, he's definitely within every living entity. I think it's described in every atom, which is something I mentioned the other day I'm taking a class on hermeneutics. And we had to list something that we struggle with in our Krishna consciousness. And I said, for me, my brain is too small. I cannot comprehend how God is in every atom. I'm going to accept it. I can't comprehend it at all. So, is he there? Yeah, he's there. Now, are you asking the other question, how can we understand that Krishna is allowing this to go on? Or you just want to technically understand how is he within every biological entity? I mean, you could argue that he's in the heart of every living entity and viruses aren't really alive, so maybe he's not there. That's too technical for me. You could make that argument.
No, Prabhuji, for me, it's more about, I think, reconciliation with that fact. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is a big challenge for all religious people. If you know Gopal Gupta, Radhika Raman's brother, Gopal Hari, he wrote a book about, actually he wrote an article in the ISKCON Communication Journal, I think, Journal of Vaishnava Studies recently about suffering. That we had a dialogue on this a few years ago. Technically, the term is theodicy. Have you ever heard of that term, theodicy? He's talking about where does evil come from? So one of the questions is about suffering. Why is there suffering? And sometimes it's put in the context, say in the Christian terms, if there's an all-merciful God, how can there be so much suffering in the world? Now we have a similar kind of a dilemma. If there's an all-merciful God, how can there be so much suffering in the world? Now we sometimes, if we want a simplistic answer, we'll say, well, it's karma. You know, some person's born in a richer family, some person's born in a poorer family, some person has an advantage to get more education, some person less. Why? Because their karma is what they did in their past life. In simplistic, I mean, not, in one sense, it's very, very complex, but simple in the sense it's kind of like we can kind of put it all aside. It's a simple answer, and we don't have to think about it much. But we have to be really very, very careful as Vaishnavas that we don't allow that to become hard-hearted. You know, it's not that because we understand, like, let's just say you're walking down the street and you see a child has fallen off their bicycle and they've, broken their arm and they're crying. Okay. Now, none of us would dare think, oh, she fell and broke her arm because she was going too fast on her bicycle and walked by because she doesn't deserve any help because we understand how she hurt herself. Is it? We would never think like that. We'd immediately go to help her or him out of compassion. And in one sense, it doesn't matter what the source of it, was she riding too fast? Did a tree fall on her? Was it her fault? Was it her brother's fault? Doesn't matter. She's suffering. And it's our natural response to try to alleviate that suffering. Now, when you go to the hospital, you know, they sometimes it happens. I had a friend that had this happen. He had a daughter, when she was about 6 years old, she fell out of a truck and hurt herself badly. And they took her to the hospital to heal some broken bone or something. In the course of that, they discovered she had leukemia. But because she was so young, they actually were able to treat her. And they say if she hadn't had that accident, they never would have run the kind of sophisticated tests that they ran to see what else was wrong with her. They never would have discovered the disease. They never would have cured the disease, and she would have died at a very young age. As it was, somehow, I don't know, the medical procedures involved, but they were able to treat her. So we also have this faith that, and we have that experience. Sometimes, you know, some suffering comes upon us and we realize, okay, we just know, we can see, we experience, well, this is, you know, you say something mean to your husband or your wife or your boss, and immediately you get a reaction. You realize, okay, I need to learn from that. I can't be disrespectful to the boss. I can't be mean to my wife. You know, I get mean to my wife. She gets upset. She cries. Dinner doesn't get finished. I go hungry, and we're both miserable for 3 days. So I better learn how to be nice. So sometimes there's immediate things, immediate reactions, immediate karma that we see helps us. Other times they're more difficult. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, to think about, you know, why is it, like say with the corona, okay, 300,000 people have died. You know, it's sad now. And sometimes you see, you know, children die, and which is particularly painful. And we don't always understand where that pain and that suffering comes from. This is where I think we have to go to a different level of our Krishna consciousness, which is one, we try to do everything we can to alleviate the suffering, both in this world and especially help them for their future, knowing that the soul's just passing through. You know, in one sense, Krishna says in the Gita, a wise person doesn't lament for the living or the dead. But at the same time, Prabhupada explains about a saintly person, they traverse the earth, they give their lives to trying to give people answers to their ignorance about, so they can reconnect with God and stop their suffering. So we simultaneously understand that there's suffering caused by our past karma, individually and collectively. We want to try to help alleviate the suffering in this world, especially by giving people Krishna consciousness to get at the root of the cause. And sometimes there may be things we just can't understand. This is a third part of it that we have to kind of keep in mind. Sometimes we just cannot understand. I mean, it happens in our Vaishnava families. I've got friends who had children died at a very young age. And I can't understand that. And it's very traumatic for the family, very traumatic. You know, sometimes people, you know, I mean, sometimes things happen and they're so difficult. We can't understand, but this is where we go to our faith. And this is something I think we have in common with the Christians. And I think they've really developed some of their theology on this quite well. Sometimes we don't know, but we maintain our faith that Krishna is my loving friend. He has the best interest of every living entity in mind. And ultimately he's set up this whole world to help us come back to him. And maybe I can just kind of end with a story I just heard just the other night. Being Christmas, we just, you know, because Christmas music is some really beautiful songs. Somehow my wife or I, we click, you know, Google, you can Google anything these days. Like, you know, we ended up with something like the 10 best Christmas songs. In one of them, they did a little drama, and the song was written by a man. No, it wasn't even a Christian. It was a hymn or something called "All Is Well with My Soul." It's a really beautiful song. All is well with my soul. I never knew the history behind it, but they explaining. This man was in America with his wife and his 4 kids. They were gonna sail, and this is like in the 1700s or 1800s. They were going to sail back to Europe. He got held up. He couldn't go. He said he'd come a little later. A few weeks later, there was a huge storm. His 4 kids drowned. and somehow his wife survives. So she gets to France and she sends this message back, I'm alone, all your children are dead. Little kids, like 2 years, 5 years, huge trauma. And on the way across the ocean, he wrote this just amazingly beautiful song about how when times are completely dark, when I have no understanding of what's happening and why things are so difficult, I reach out to you, Lord, and I pray all is well with my soul. That somehow in the midst of the most difficult times, I know you're there. I know you have some higher purpose in mind. And there's this amazing song that's like very well known among Christians. I've heard it a few times, but I didn't know the history. Later he got with his wife. She had survived. They had another child. That child died. And then they had another child that went on, partly inspired by her mother's suffering, who went on to become some huge altruistic person who opened a bunch of schools for children and maybe for orphans, and just had this amazing impact, positive impact on the world, in part as a result of her suffering. I'll end with one other little story. I got 2 minutes left here. I have a friend whose teenage son died. He was walking along the train track with a friend. Don't ever walk on train tracks, people. They saw a train coming, and they were the next track over, but they didn't hear the train behind them. And an instant before the train hit them, this young man pushed the girl he was walking with out of the way of the train. He got hit and was killed. I was in a conference at the Festival of Inspiration in New Vrindavan. We had about 10 years in a row in New Vrindavan, and was with the mother of this son. And it was a seminar on why bad things happen to good people. And this woman, this mother, everyone around her talked about the trouble they'd had. And then she told her story, and the whole room was in tears. And she was saying how she would give her arm or her life to have her son back. We're all thinking, like, you don't say to somebody like that, this is karma, right? I mean, what kind of heartless person could say that? Who knows what the reason is? There must be some cause, but you can't say that to a mother who's lost their child. And at the end of the whole hour and a half, very, very heart-wrenching kind of a conversation, the devotee leading the thing asked everybody, is there anything you learned through your suffering? And this lady said one of the most profound things I've ever heard. She said, I'll never really understand this, and I would do anything to change what happened. But if I learned anything, I learned how much Krishna must love us, because my heart aches so much in pain in the separation of my child. I can hardly imagine how much God must love us. And then the whole room went from like tears to like flooding. It was just such and here's a lady. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that in this life for sure. But through all that pain, she'd come to a deeper understanding of how much Krishna loves us. And ultimately, put in the context, we know we're not this body. We are spirit soul. We've been many, many lives before. We could have many, many in the future. Hopefully not. We'll just go to Krishna. But we are just passing through. And while the suffering here sometimes can be immense, we have that faith, as that Christian man in his prayer wrote, and as this mother realized, that we may not understand, but we have that faith that Krishna is doing everything for our ultimate good. And that gives us strength. And that doesn't lead us to be hard-hearted, the exact opposite. Because as our hearts soften, realizing how much pain there is, and calling out to Krishna, we want to try to alleviate that pain with others. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhuji. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Which only takes us back to Shada's question. We have such a wonderful concept of God, and such a wonderful lineage of teachers, and such a wonderful philosophy, and such a wonderful culture. How can we help but become humble and try to share with others? We have no other choice.
I want to thank you.
Ending, that was our topic, right? Unpacking Christmas.